Well, great day, everyone, and welcome to Spirit in Mind, where we discuss current affairs, rather, with faith and mental health perspectives. I'm Bishop Guy Robinson, and I count it a blessing to be with you today, and grateful for my colleague, Dr. Jonathan Shepard. Dr. Shepard, good day to you. I think you're on mute.
Mute. Sorry about that. Good day, Bishop. How are you, sir?
Doing well, doing well. We're glad to have our Spirit and Mind family with us. And how was your week, Dr. Shepard?
Week was all right. Yeah, I had my family here. Had celebrated a wonderful Mother's Day on Sunday. Both my father and mother were here, and had a wonderful time with them. Didn't do too much. They didn't want to do that much because they just wanted to get out of Chicago and relax. And so we had a wonderful time just for being together, allowing for them to recuperate and recover, as so many of us are trying to do coming through the pandemic. I believe that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, as you've been hearing in so many different exposés from scientists, and I do concur with them. And so people are going to be taking those little trips and excursions, if you would. And so that's how I spent half the weekend. Thankfully, they made their safe arrival back home.
Great. And I'm grateful for our Spirit and Mind family, as I was saying, being with us. So grateful to have you with us. Please feel free to share. Please feel free to let persons know that it is time for Spirit in Mind. And we so look forward to the dialogue and engagement and questions inside of our Spirit and Mind family as well, because you're a part of Spirit and Mind. And we're grateful for this time. Dr. Shepard just finished, so maybe we could jump right in. Because Dr. Shepard, you just finished saying a key word, talking about the pandemic. And of course, you typically have been giving us updates every week for this really for the duration of this season. And now there's a whole lot of talk. And this week we've been talking about, perhaps if you had to give it a title, maybe we've been talking about maybe pandemic anxiety or post-pandemic anxiety. You talked about the light at the end of the tunnel. And, then how do you deal with this anxiety that may be worried? How do we know the light at the end of the tunnel is a light and not a train? That's the classic anxiety person's response to that. So, right. I raised that a little tongue in cheek, but it does kind of identify that matter of perspective and how we see things and what things may be triggering our anxiety. And I'm going to leave all this. I'm going to lay it out, and then you tackle it. And, take the blessings and the heat that comes with it. But
yes, sir.
A lot of discussion, even from Capitol Hill, from political arenas to the CDC press conferences and other places. How do we discern and decipher from what some people call mixed messaging and uncertainties, all of which can trigger anxieties? How do we know the difference between people who are vaccinated and not, and when to remove the mask, and how does that affect stores, and employers are worried about their employees who may be engaging persons in the store who are unmasked. And so all these things are potential triggers. And so how do we make sense of this, and what are some things we should consider?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You just kind of sum it all up and just lay it at me as I as I have the answer. Though we're gonna start with number one. I don't have the answer. Let's just be clear about that, because there is such a multiplicity of factors that are in play here. And that's why we're even starting out the show a little bit different than we normally would, because there's just so much that has happened even this week. And I would love to hear from those who are comments, who love the comment. And even if you don't, let's hear you comment today, because we want to know, what is it that is affecting you? There has been some news today or this week that has affected you. I know it has, because it has affected me. When we heard from the CDC that the mask mandate for those who have been fully vaccinated, and those who, when you say fully vaccinated, those who receive either the 2 doses of the Moderna or Pfizer, or the 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson, that you no longer have to wear a mask indoors at certain locations. And it was really, Bishop, it was about face. Wednesday, they were saying one thing, and then Thursday, they came out with this report. And if you talk to most scientists, epidemiologists, they were not expecting this. It was like a complete 180, and there was no forewarning. There was no prepping. And so you've been hearing a lot of dialogue. If you listen to news media reels, social media posts, there's just a lot of angst, because once again, we failed to prepare the people. And that's where, if you're going to listen to everything we're going to talk about today, there's going to be a common thread about how do we prepare people for transition, for change, and whether or not is it in line with truth. And I'm not stating it the best way, but really there is an attack on truth, which has made us even more anxious. If we just go back to last year, no one expected the pandemic to occur, and it wasn't prophesied, it wasn't predicted, nothing like that. And when we made that fast turn, I mean, literally, it was a turn where, bam, we have to close our doors of all essential or non-essential businesses, and close our schools. We have to close our operations of business, and people were scared because it was such a quick turn. Literally in less than a week, for many people, schools were closed, shut down. And now here we go once again, Bishop, quick turnaround. Well, now you're fully vaccinated, and now you can take your mask off. And so people don't know what to believe. So I hope you're hearing the line. People don't know who to trust. And that's why I really want to hear from people today, because I know that there are people out there who are anxious, who are not saying, who are saying, I don't know who to believe. I don't know who to trust. And that's really a failure on leadership. I hate to say it, but it's a failure on leadership. It's a failure to take into account of people's feelings and how they're going to respond to things. When change occurs, it definitely does have to take into consideration how people will respond to that change. Absolutely. And so yesterday, just to add on top of this, the governor of Maryland, he decided also that he was going to lift the mandate for Maryland, after just saying a couple of days ago that he's going to wait until 70% of the persons in Maryland received 1 shot, and he predicted that to be around Memorial Day. Memorial Day is still a little more than 2 weeks away. So again, it's like, wait a minute, you just said this. I was prepping for this, and now you're telling me, well, we're already where we need to be at. how did we get there? And so that's where a lot of the people are anxious because people are saying, how did we get to this point where a decision was made and we just heard you lay out the evidence of how to get to that decision, but now you changed your mind. And so people are stuck. People are not really knowing how to move forward in all of this. So we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about some ethical principles. We're also going to talk about, when we're talking about truth, how we need to differentiate between the person and the institution. Just for example, between President Trump and the Republican Party. I'll just use that for a practical example. So all these things today, we're going to lay out for you. And of course, we're going to have the spiritual perspective. We're going to provide some spiritual examples for you today. So yes, that's kind of the run of the show. But Bishop, I tell you, this is really something that is hot and really evolving. There may even come some things today that we may find out from the CDC and government.
Yes, absolutely. And that's today's show is really going to be about anxiety and truth. The anxiety triggers that are in our current experience and the sanctity of truth. What is truth? What happened to it? Is it still here? And so we'll be talking about those kind of things because they seem to be the existential themes that are kind of big in our society today. And so and I'm glad you raised that, Dr. Shepherd. I saw one commentator talk about perhaps the philosophy is saying, okay, we've got some people vaccinated and we're not going to be held up by the persons who are not. Here it is coming at you. And perhaps that would be a motivation, an incentive for those who have not been vaccinated to that if you just go ahead and open the floodgates. This was one commentator on the news show. So maybe if you just go ahead and open the floodgates, if you will, so to speak, persons will say, oh man, they serious and we're moving forward. I need to prioritize that. Now that's a speculation, of course. It's a strategy. The question, I guess, would be people, will it work?
Right. Yeah. The thing that we have to be careful of, and so let's just begin to, tackle some of these things from the scientific standpoint. We have to be aware that even if you're fully vaccinated, it does not mean that you cannot contract the coronavirus. Case in point, we saw 8 players on the New York Yankees who have been fully vaccinated and yet contracted the coronavirus. They have received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, from what I understand. And I'm not here to bash or to prefer one vaccination over the other, okay? But I'm just saying that those 8 players, from what I understand, have received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. They yet contracted the coronavirus, but they did not contract, or it did not progress, I should say, to the COVID-19 disease. We have to make sure that we understand that when you are vaccinated, that it prevents the disease, the hospitalizations, and the death. So that's what the purpose of the vaccination is not to stop you from contracting the coronavirus. All right. And we have to continue to put that message out so that people understand that. I say that because now we have people who are not vaccinated. We still don't even have 50% of the U.S. population who is fully vaccinated. I believe we're still about 36%, somewhere up in there. I don't think it's 40% yet. If someone wants to check that for me, you can hit us up in the comments. But I know it's not yet 50%. So you're going to be going into areas where people who are who are not vaccinated, you as a fully vaccinated person could be carrying the virus and then transfer that virus over to someone who is not vaccinated, and then they get the whole sequelae of disease. the unable to breathe. And one of our listeners now, she just gave a praise report of how she was in the hospital with COVID-19 and how God brought her out. And so we're thankful for that. This is one of our listeners back in Chicago. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. But I hate to say, everybody don't have that testimony, Bishop.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
And so how do you as a leader be able to navigate? And I've been really thinking about this so much, even this morning. How do you navigate and walk that fine line between knowing that there's persons who you're responsible for who are not vaccinated? There are people who are vaccinated, and how do you mix the two and yet, be able to be at ease with their coming together? That's something that you have, that weighs on your mind, I'm certain. And, as you walk in through the stores and, I even have some friends of mine who will say, well, Shepherd, you're okay. Stop worrying, you need to exercise faith and this and that. And I've been thinking about, how do you walk that fine line between institutions, legal, faith, and science? That really is something that is all kind of coming together really at a kind of like a bam, all at one time, overlapping. And this is a perfect scenario because now, people are going to be going back into institutions such as their job, such as the faith communities, back into their houses of worship. And many of them have not been vaccinated yet. And so what do you tell them? Do you check their ID card as they're coming in? Do you have a wand over there? Again, I'm being facetious now, but are you vaccinated? If you're not vaccinated, you got to sit over here. If you are, you can sit over. It's one of those type of things. And man, I would love to get. I don't see too many comments coming through just yet. I would love to hear what you all are saying and thinking in your mind, because it has to be weighing on you. I'm gonna stop right there, Bishop.
Good things for reflection. That's the word needed, because I think your questions are really provoking thought for leaders. That's not just leaders. I mean leaders in multiple contexts. Leaders, whether you are a faith leader or whether you are an employer having to make decisions about how to bring your employees back to work, whether you're a faith leader making decisions on how to bring your congregation back into worship, or whether you are a matriarchal or patriarchal figure trying to figure out how your family gatherings are going to look. All of those are different contextualizations for leadership and people who look to us. And again, in a family setting, in family dynamics, there may be some persons who are just kind of carefree in the family. And you may have always been the thinker in the family, or the one to worry about systems and planning and how's the reunion going to come together. Then that may still be your role in having to be the voice of reason. And how do you navigate between, I hear the tension that you're raising, Dr. Shepherd. It's even theologically, it's the tension between faith and works. You said some of your friends were raising that, and that's a big discussion in seminary settings. And Paul, justified by faith, and James, faith without works is dead. And so how do you know what part is my part to take on certain preventable behaviors?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do the maximum to think about that? And that means there's some stuff I can't be avoiding about. There's some things that, oh man, I don't want to think about that. Well, you have to first, so that you can really enjoy the time together when the family gets together, or when the job opens up, or when the church opens up. So what are the parts that may be uncomfortable but are necessary for me to think about before we can even really get to having a truly good time, and minimizing the consequences that we don't want. And then what are the parts that require just that we trust God? The truth is, time is filled with swift transition, as the hymn writer said, and we have a desire and an appetite. It's just human nature. We have an appetite for certainty. We want to absolutely know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we don't have epistemic access to tomorrow. So much of what we talk about in the future is really, at best, statistical probability, and more so than certainty. And so how do you wrestle with that? The truth is, every time, I don't know if our engineer, Minister Cat, does such a great job of catching up with our last minute moments, but the truth is, every time, according to the National Safety Council, every time we walk out the door, there's at least some possibility. And really staying at home, there's no risk-free existence. Here's just a couple of things from the National Safety Council, not to depress us, but to see how much we live by faith. So we're going to turn it around, but stay with us. Risk of heart disease, 1 in 6. Risk of cancer, 1 in 7. Risk of chronic lower respiratory disease, 1 in 27. Wow. This is, of course, generalizations on a national level, but risk of suicide, risk of opioid dose, and if not us, a loved one. Motor vehicle crash, 1 in 103. You can stay home, but the risk of a fall that becomes injurious. Gun assault, pedestrian accident. These are just assessments of safety risk assessments put together by the National Safety Council. What it means is that there is no risk-free existence for us. We truly live by faith. None of these things really keep us from engaging in certain lives. Now, let me say this. This is where the anxiety comes in. On that list again, if there's anything that is a particular source of concern for us or particular fear, you remember in the Bible, Job said, the thing that I've greatly feared has come upon me. And so if any of those things are a particular concern of all of that list, if possible, maybe we can put that back up again. If you look at it again, if it is a particular trigger for us, then in our minds, that risk becomes much larger in our minds than it is on the record. If I'm making sense, if the great fear for me is a fall, then in my mind, though the statistics are 1 in 114 by scientific, I guess, evidence-based research, but in my mind, I have a particular phobia or anxiety about falling. Then for me, it's much bigger than 1 in 114, and it begins to take its effect in my behavior. My steps become cautious. Maybe I don't even step or get up at all because it becomes big in my mind, and my anxieties then kick in. And so thank you. So that's just a little bit of that concept. But the point that we're making is, Dr. Shepard, so when we talk about how do we know that and the chances of COVID, and the language is the language of statistical probability. When you say stuff like this vaccine is 94% effective, it's not 100. That's not certainty. Right. It's statistical probability. That's and right. So for that, there will be a measure of faith that is involved in it. But what is the measure of faith? And then what are the common sense, scientifically supported steps that we can make to do our part to make sure that the risk is as minimal as possible? And that's what I hear when you're talking about living in these tensions. And how do we gather and honor the assembling of ourselves, as Hebrews 10 and 25 says, and do it with the maximum consideration for safety and all those kind of things. So, yeah, we're navigating, and that's what keeps us, you want to be honest from pastoral perspective, that's what keeps us prayerful. because we gotta stay before God in a way that does both things, not just asking God to do it all for us, but asking God to show us what we're supposed to do to participate in the miracle, to take up our bed and walk, to go wash in the pool, the responsibility part of the miracle, so that God can do the miracle. But he usually, oftentimes, I'll say, charges us with a participatory role in the working of miracles.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why, I encourage people to be sensitive. If you know that you have not been vaccinated, still wear your mask. This is not the time to drop that particular public health measure. And if you've been vaccinated, I encourage you to go and wear your mask even in places where people have not been vaccinated. I've made that decision, and I will come out of it slowly, as far as when I was just stopped wearing a mask altogether. But people have been asking me, Bishop, what are you going to do? It's just, I don't know what to do. It's just, and so I hear you. And yes, it is anxiety provoking, but we want to make sure that we are taking those steps. And, there's no rush. That's one of the things too, that we have to understand. When people get anxious, you have to help them to calm down and help them to see there is no rush. Okay. If you want to continue to wear your mask for the rest of 2021, that's great. Please do so. There is no rush. There is no right answer to this. We're learning as we go through. And I know some people might say, well, I can't tell if people are telling me the truth or not. And again, it is a question, that people ask. And so it is one of those things that I'm glad Bishop put up today about the risk factors and risk assessments that we need to make. I'll say that. So that really is in line with what we are discussing today. I see we're almost at the halfway point of the show. Thank you, Catherine Jones. Yes. I continue. I will continue to wear my mask also a little bit longer too. Absolutely. Someone already mentioned about just going to do a pivot here that regarding the House, the Congress, the GOP. There we go. The Republican Party, and how they ousted their conference chair, Representative Liz Cheney. And, it's so interesting that you watch what's happening within that particular party and how it has played out in public, but also it really is helping define what's happening in our society, Bishop. It's just amazing, just the different parallels as I see that play out and where it's playing out in other areas within our society. And it really is unfortunate because you have a person who has a very conservative record. Let me just put a pin right there. It also tells me too that we are more alike than we are different. There's so many times that people try to keep saying that we're more different than alike, but actually we are more alike than different. We may disagree about some ideologies, but I've been looking to see how she's very conservative, and I'm not sure if people on this show, they are in step in line with her. Doesn't matter, but she's made a stance for truth. She made a stance against President Donald Trump, who was behind the insurrection on January 6th. And it's as if her making that stance is what got her ousted from her position. And, the question begs, and even as I'm talking here, I can really hear the Lord speaking to me that how many of us have made a stance on a position of truth and got kicked out because we took a stand for truth? Wow. And that doesn't necessarily feel good. And I can only imagine what she must feel like, but she made a stance. And, I applaud her for the stance that she made because it has been proven President Trump was behind this. He was even going to have his vice president potentially assaulted in that particular rampage on the Capitol at the time. I mean, it's just unbelievable of what happened that day, and that happened in our country. But yet people want to say it wasn't his fault, or it didn't even happen, when their own lives were at stake. That's what I don't understand here, is when you've gone through something, when you see it happen, and yet people, after it has happened, it was no big deal. That really bothers me, because it tells me that we've gotten to the scripture, I believe is in the New Testament, Bishop, and you'll confirm that for me, about what people are truth breakers or truce breakers, and people don't want to hear the truth. It's almost as if you can present it as an entree in front of them, and they see it, and yet, oh, that's not what I ordered, and yet that's exactly what you ordered. You know, it bothers me. And so what is done is, and I want to present this particular part, and then let Bishop take over. There is bioethical principles. As a physician, we study about ethics, and ethics is one of those things that, in my profession, and even in Bishop's profession, of course, as a pastor, as a community leader, ethics is of utmost importance. And the word ethics is derived from a Greek word named ethos, and which means character. So ethics equates to a person's character. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Truth breakers. I knew someone's going to help me out. And I've been thinking about this really all day, about just how we are living in a day where ethics, we want to have a high standard of ethics, but we don't want our own selves. No, let me say it like this. We want to hold people to a level of ethics that we ourselves don't want to hold to. I'll say that. When I look at the word ethics, it means character. But one of the basic bioethic principles is what's called veracity. It's Veracity. And this particular principle is defined as the duty to be honest, to tell the truth and not mislead through acts of commission or omission. Man, Bishop, that thing hit me. As I was studying, I was like, wow, is this what we're really dealing with? And there's other principles, ethical principles, that we can take some time at a later time to study and do a deeper dive. But that one out of the 12 really hit me hard. Like, wow, it's called the principle of veracity. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. The duty to be honest. And so it really blows my mind sometimes as I listen to what happened on Capitol Hill yesterday, as they elected the New York representative who voted to say that President Trump should have stayed in office. She didn't vote to overturn. I'm sorry, she voted to overturn the election. It's just, where is your duty to be honest? You know, that's what really grabs me here. And so that's why that conversation, and I'm ending here, about how to be able to differentiate between the person, such as Donald Trump, and the institution, the Republican Party, because what they're saying now is the Republican Party is Donald Trump. And anytime that becomes where an institution becomes the person, that institution is headed for big trouble, especially when we can't even have the duty to be honest pushed forward. I'm gonna stop right there, Bishop.
Whoa, this is This is a lot. And you've raised a lot of good stuff. So the woe is like, yes, this is weighty. Let me start with the word of God because we're talking about what is truth. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But a couple of maybe months ago, we talked about on Spirit and Mind about Merriam-Webster dictionaries, 2016 word of the year that is still resonating and reverberating years later, which is post-truth.
Right.
Post-truth, again, is sort of a pragmatic approach to what truth is, because there's several theories of truth. Correspondence theory, semantic theory, coherence, but then there's the pragmatic theory of truth. We don't have to nerd out on those, but in a philosophy class, the pragmatic philosophy is basically if it works, then go with it. And so post-truth kind of says that and alleges that in our postmodern era, in the 21st century, we are fascinated and live by this code of if it works, it's more important than it being true. That's an ethical dilemma by that very statement. And so what you've just alluded to is probably no coincidence that as it concerns what happened in one of our Spirit of My Family persons wrote it in there about the Representative Liz Cheney piece. Well, that controversy is over what some have identified, I emphasize some, have identified as the big lie, as to the legitimacy of the election or illegitimacy. And that big lie, as it's been called, is motivating people's behavior. People who have taken that thing that has been labeled as the big lie as a truth are being motivated by that. And so now we're dealing with, in this post-truth world, truth breakers. But then there is also in the scripture when the Bible is clear that there will come a day when people will not be able, listen to the language, to endure sound doctrine.
Wow.
What a thing. I want to tie that into anxiety and what you said about sometimes when we're in an anxious state, we need to be told to calm down and hear the voice of reason. And so there's this age of anxiety that we're in. And yet there is this biblical principle where people will no longer be able, Paul tells that to Timothy as well. It's 2 Timothy 4, in fact, which is right. You just did the truth breakers in 2 Timothy 3. And then 2 Timothy 4 says the time will come when people will not be able to endure sound doctrine, which means it takes time to sit down and work through these issues and introspect and have someone to impart truth to us. And it seems unbearable in an age that wants quick and immediate fixes to its anxious proclivities. But and so this is the tensions. They won't be able to endure it. It'll take too long. It'll be boring. They'll fall asleep. They'll click off conversation like this, because if it doesn't bring quick, immediate fixes, they won't be able to endure sound doctrine, because it takes time for sound doctrine to become a part of our character. Wow. So if I'm in a quick fix and I need a quick thing, it's quick. A conspiracy theory is quick. It's simple. It's easy. It triggers our already existing trust issues. It's easy to buy into that than it is to look at the harder things. And so truth in a post-truth age has some relativity to it. Let me show it to you. They can endure the sound doctrine. And that's what brings me to the gospel in this interesting conversation that happens between Jesus and Pilate. It's in John 18, and we may be able to put it up on the screen. But in John 18, look at this conversation between Jesus and Pilate. Jesus answers Pilate and says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews." Now, that's the text. "But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Pilate, who represents Roman or secular government. Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." That's Jesus's philosophical discourse on what truth is. And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?"
Wow.
And when he had said this, he went out. I just wanted to lift that because this argument of what is truth goes all the way back to this pivotal moment. And you'll notice that Pilate doesn't even stay around for Jesus's answer. It says, "What is truth?" Wow. Some theologians argue, and thank you, we just wanted to start off reading that, but some theologians argue that Pilate is like these relative truths. The people who are pushing for your crucifixion have something that they think is their truth, and then you have your truth. And so there's the kingdoms. And so what is truth? In this pivotal moment, everybody has their relative truth. And whenever you get to that, and actually because of that, right after that, Pilate takes the thing to a vote. And given the chance to choose between Jesus, who represents, if you will, the higher nature of humanity, and Barabbas, who represents the lower nature of humanity, the people who have these different truths around them vote for Barabbas.
Right.
Who the text says, who was a robber.
Right.
Which is a little way of saying they went for the okie doke. The good news of the gospel is that God has already anticipated our poor choices and selections. Wow. and made an escape and incorporated so that all things work together for good. So please hear me. I'm not saying this as hopeless. I'm saying this to say, look at the power of God. Yeah. Right. Who incorporates even our proclivity to be confused about what truth is. Jesus clearly says there's a truth of my kingdom, and there is the relative truth of Pilate's world, or the Caesarean, or the kingdoms of this world. And as the scriptures put it, we live by, as believers, what Psalm 117 calls the truth of the Lord. That's a qualifier, which means that there are other truths. And here's the thing. In a deceitful kingdom, like the one we live in, truth takes time to be revealed. And it takes time for lies to be exposed. The challenge is that in the interim, it costs lives. Wow. But that's again why we got to live by faith. I don't have no other way to live that makes sense, because the world has its truth. We got to stand on the truth of the Lord. But things like truth and character and ethics. I had a wise general in the faith who said to me as a young preacher, truth and character and ethics are not quick dishes. Right. They can't be prepared in the microwave. Right. They got to go in the oven, right, and get through the fire and be tested, right, and be formed. And so our appetite for quick truths and inability to endure sound doctrine can make us susceptible to conspiracy theories. But we have to trust the poet William Cullen Bryant put it this way, and it inspired Dr. King. He said, truth crushed to earth shall rise again. And so we have to trust that the truth will come out. That's what Mama used to say. Truth will come out in the wash.
Yeah.
So I just lift that so that we don't lose sight of the hope of the gospel, that truth wins and the truth of the Lord shall prevail. But we got to be prayerful. We got to stay before God. We got to do our part so that we accept our part of the responsibility. But we're living in a world, that's my point. The pilots, he didn't even have time to stay around for the answer because people can't endure sound doctrine in a world of all these relative truths. My truth, this is my truth, this is my truth. And then the neighbor says, this is my truth. So how does that tie in? Well, is there a higher truth? Is there an ultimate truth? Are there immutable truths? Notwithstanding our personal, and then I'll stop, Dr. Shepard, help me out, but notwithstanding our personal preferences and personal individualism and need to individuate, I understand that psychologically and theologically and philosophically. But is there a time at which my individualism and my personal truth needs to be subject to a higher truth, to an ultimate truth? So, for example, that's what was about the mask debate. If I personally am uncomfortable by a mask, which I am, it messes with your head. If you got anxieties about it, makes me think I can't breathe sometimes. I actually can, but my anxieties start kicking in. I feel like I can't breathe. So now I feel like my personal liberties are being violated. And I am a person and I got it right. But if I'm on a plane with 200 other people, or if I'm in a market with a whole bunch of other people, or if I'm in a sanctuary with hundreds of other people, is there a point at which my truth should be subject to a higher truth? And that's when we get into the ethical dilemma.
Wow. Bishop, again, you've said quite a bit. I have a while after that.
This is a deep subject.
Oh, man, it is. And you know what? I've been really thinking about, even as you were just talking about, it really separates the men from the boys, so to speak. I'll just use that analogy because I'm just thinking about the people who have gone into certain professions. And I'm not trying to lift these professions as being more superior than others, but there are certain professions that people go into where you have to maintain a certain character in order for you to be successful in them. And being a physician is one of those. Being a spiritual leader is one of those. There's just certain ones, and there's even surveys have gone out about people who we trust or who we hold at a certain ethical standpoint. But you said something that was so important, Bishop, about how it takes time for truth to develop. I was sitting here as you was talking, I was thinking about how long of a time it took for me to get to the point to where I am today. And it's because there had to be character developed within me. You don't want a doctor who went to an online school training and was done in 2 years. If you do, I would run if you have that type of doctor, because it took me 11 years from when I entered into medical school to be able to finally practice. And I didn't skip any years in between. There was no deficiencies. There was no failures. It was 11 years. And I mentioned that because I was even thinking about this today. I've learned that when I don't know something, I need to say that. If I don't know the answer to something, it's not beneficial to me to try to make it up, to try to lie, to try to show that I know more than somebody else. You know, sometimes I struggle because I think some people they end up getting themselves into trouble. And again, I'm giving some practical tips now. They find themselves not telling the truth or getting into trouble because they would rather not be embarrassed, or their pride gets in the way. And we want to encourage you today that even when you don't know the answer to something, it's all right to say, I don't know. As a physician, if I don't know everything, there's no way I can know everything. Even if I studied it before, I have to go back to the book sometime and say, wow, I can't remember. Even when I ask for help with that scripture, I've read the Bible more than once all the way through. I can't remember everything that's in the Bible. It's just I'm human. I have a finite capacity. But yet we still live in a society that will want to make it seem that if we don't know something, there's something wrong with us or it's deficient within us. And so we have to know that there's nothing wrong with that. I really was thinking, man, Bishop, you really hit on that point, because as a pastor, as a spiritual leader, you want somebody who has character. You want somebody who has been through the storm and has experience. Now, I'm not saying that age brings about experience. I'm not getting to that. And yes, in certain circles, it does. But, some people say, well, I have to have an old pastor, or I have to have an old physician. No, you don't. And I'm just mentioning that now. Age is not what I'm getting into. You want to have people, whether they're young or old, that's my point, who are able to say, I have a duty to be honest. I have what it takes to let you know when I don't know something. Wow, that is so important. I can really see people now, that whole pilot example, Bishop, people asking, what is the truth? Wow, that's deep. That's deep.
And then leaving before they wrestle with it.
Yeah, and then leaving before they wrestle. Yeah, absolutely. There's some other principles here. I'm going to just mention one other one that I think is very important to mention today as far as bioethic principles. And that one is altruism. All right. Altruism, which is the commitment of service to benefit others, even at the cost of personal sacrifice. Wow. And so I'm mentioning these type of things of ethics of which we want to not throw away. Our society is trying to water these things down or just literally eliminate them. But we have to remember that there is persons, faith believers, all of us, there should be a principle of altruism, commitment to service to benefit others, even at the cost of personal sacrifice. What do you mean, even at the cost of personal sacrifice? You mean I got to give up something for the benefit of others? Oh my God, no, there's no way. I'm too individualistic. It's all about me. It's all about what I'm going to do. Oh, come on, you all. And that's what we see being portrayed here. When we see a President Donald Trump, it's not about the greater good of society. It's about blowing up his ego. It's about blowing up MAGA, make America great again. What in the world is he talking about? It's just, it really is puzzling when you see people who are following behind persons who are much more inflated about their ego as opposed to the institutions. You have to be careful. That's why you have to be discerning as to even your spiritual leaders. I'll even go there. You want to be with a spiritual leader who is not all about himself or herself, but who is committed to the benefit of the congregation, even at the personal sacrifice of themselves. Even as myself, I had to do that during the pandemic. I was committed to extending myself beyond normal working hours, having my own salary cut to be able to benefit the greater organization. You don't see people doing stuff like that. You hear about these CEOs who are getting these big time bonuses, pharmaceutical company CEOs who are just getting buku money based off of the illnesses of other people. That's one of the reasons why healthcare in this country is far behind other countries that are not even as developed as ours, because we have people who are benefiting from the illnesses of others. And so again, it questions not just the veracity, but also the altruism, our commitment of service to benefit others, even at the cost of personal sacrifice. And I know we have those people out there, but we want to continue to push again forward. You heard me say that earlier. We want to push these things forward. I want people to know that we're not going to let these principles be watered down, even if it seems like at this time in our society that they are.
So very important. Absolutely. And that's the thing. We're talking about truth. And just for clarity, that's 2 Timothy 4, and that we gave, that it takes time to learn and wrestle with these things like altruism that Dr. Shepherd just mentioned. And in fact, I just pulled it up to quote it directly. For the time will come when people will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires. That means there has to become a time when altruistic or bigger pictures become more important than my own desires. It will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, because I like people who say what I want to hear as opposed to what I need to hear, that may not be what I desire to hear. And they will turn their ears. Here's our subject. Look at verse 4. And they will turn their ears away from the truth. They will walk out on it before you can answer, like Pilate did. And here's the point: and be turned aside to fables, which means the shorter my attention span gets to wrestle with these things, the more vulnerable we become to fables, conspiracy theories. It's all. That's why I love the Word of God, because it speaks to certain things about the human condition that transcend the confines of time and history. So, and so here's this relevance today. And you're talking about altruism, and we're about to close, but that reminds me of this idea of giving to others. It takes time to develop a sense of others in fundamental object relations theory. We start off kind of thinking that the whole world is about us. That's sort of a sign of immaturity to a degree, particularly if you go with Erikson's stages of human development. One of the more mature stages is the stage of generativity, which is what Erikson called it, where we start thinking about, how am I going to sow into others? How am I going to give back? How am I going to impart not just the knowledge that I've acquired, but the wisdom? The wisdom is the ability to use knowledge. That's a gift of the Spirit. So how will I begin to impart wisdom to others? That's usually a more mature stage of human development. So what that basically says is that selfishness and immaturity kind of go together. And so maturation is not necessarily an age, but it is a stage at which I have seen this altruistic cause, that this is my purpose, and I'm going to give to something that is bigger and better, or that is fulfilling by giving to something bigger than me, outside of me. The alternative, in the strict Erikson theory, the alternative to embracing generativity is despair, which is the conflict, if you go with the theory, which is literally saying, if I do not reach this maturation stage of finding fulfillment in giving to higher causes, if I continue to make life all about me, it will never satisfy, and I will end up in the state of despair. So in Kierkegaard's called despair the absence of hope. So because I can never get enough. I can't get enough cars. I can't get enough titles. I can't get enough affirmation. I can't get enough restaurants. I can't get enough birthday parties. So a birthday has now become a month-long celebration because I can't get enough. And so, and it still doesn't satisfy. You just celebrated you for a whole month and you're still empty.
Wow.
And so, because if I don't find this ability to tie into something bigger than me and serve that altruistically, because it's my purpose, because it is a part of why I'm here, then if I don't find that stage of generativity, that maturity, then I'll live a life of despair. So it takes time to develop a sense of others. Jesus put it this way: the highest form of love is when we give ourselves for a friend.
Yes.
So it takes time to mature to that point. And the more immature we are, the more selfish and self-absorbed we are. It's just so may we grow up as a nation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Bishop, I have nothing else to say. I agree. I think the last phrase, what you just said, is very good as a summation. Let us grow up. Just a very sober-minded show today, because this is the times that we're living in. Honestly, these are the times we're living in. Let's seek out truth. Let's not be discouraged. Let's not be put off by what we're hearing. Let's continue to read the word of God, study it, develop the hope, develop the faith. There should be a hunger. There should be an appetite for truth. Let's continue. And I pray that God will continue to create that appetite that you have for truth, appetite for what is sound doctrine. That's my prayer for you all today, that your ears will be able to endure, that you'll be able to hear what God has. Because let me tell you, God is speaking currently. He has not shut his mouth. He has let us know he is still in control. He has let us know that he knows what is happening and he is concerned about us. Please never forget that. But as we're going through this, and I thank God for the maturation that this pandemic has afforded me, and I pray it has afforded you. So let's move forward in God. Yeah, that's all I want to say, Bishop. I'm excited, even though it was a sobering conversation. It was an enlightening conversation and helpful for me.
Yes, amen. I echo that. May we fulfill the desire of God. Psalm 51, David says, surely, Lord, you desire truth in the inward parts. You want us to be true to ourselves and true with ourselves concerning the truth of the Lord, not the truth of our opinions, but the truth of the Lord. Let God be true and let every doctrine of man be a lie. And so may we live in that truth. May we mature to that. That's a weighty thing. That doesn't come overnight. And sometimes, and we didn't even get to deal with that, to live with that means to also have some of our misconceptions dismantled. And truth dismantles deception. And so, and yet that's something good to look forward to. And I echo Dr. Shepherd. Today was very sobering, but prayerfully, it will be very helpful, because ultimately the truth sets us free. Thank you for joining us. Listen, we'll be here on Spirit in Mind. These are interesting times, and we're so grateful that you're spending time with us as we navigate through these interesting times together. And as we are looking at the light at the end of the tunnel, ending where we started, may we come out of the tunnel wiser. May we have learned the lesson and not repeat the same things and go through the tunnel. They have to go back and go through the tunnel and go back. But may we emerge wiser and stronger and more altruistic and even more ethical and more mature. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be here should the Lord give us grace on Spirit in Mind.